I'm Matthew Johnson. I'm a lecturer in politics at Lancaster University, and I went to schools in Northumberland. And the schools I went to were quite similar because they were rural schools, so I had lots of people from, in some cases, quite rural backgrounds. In some cases, there would be commuters. But in each of the cases, the experience at school was fairly similar, actually. I think, like a lot of people, when I first went to school, it became apparent that it wasn't necessarily a good thing to be clever at school. That if you were clever, you were in, you almost like undermining your peers. Like you were the swot, you were the teacher's pet, and it was quite clear that in order to do well socially at school, you had to downplay your intelligence. So I think a lot of people at school actively downplayed their intelligence, and I think that meant that teachers found it very, very difficult to deal with certain kids. So certain kids would get a lot of stick from teachers, perhaps because they were downplaying their intelligence, or they were trying to get attention from other kids and things like that. So I think one of the problems that I had throughout the years that I was at school was that, I absolutely hated school. And it felt like a prison sentence. So going to school on a daily basis was just horrible. And you count down the seconds until you could get out of school. And it did feel as if you were being kept there against your will, basically to kill time. So I think for a lot of the kids who, like me, were actually quite capable of doing well academically, I mean, I'm a lecturer, I've done a doctorate, these sorts of things, were really thoroughly bored by the experience of being at school. It didn't test you, it didn't necessarily stimulate you. You were doing stuff that everybody had to do, and you were constantly being told off and undermined by teachers. So a lot of the teachers that dealt with us and dealt with some of the kids that were my friends would constantly knock your confidence. So in one sense you were trying to fit in with your peers and appear normal, and on the other hand you were being knocked and told off for doing that by teachers all the time. But one of the things I think I learned through being at school was that it just wasn't a place where I learned effectively. And I think there were lots of different settings that I did learn in effectively, and that I could motivate myself to be interested in things. So I think one of the big things when I was at high school was just constantly being told that I was going to fail all of my exams, and getting predicted D's, E's and F's and all the rest of it. And not necessarily having any particular future planned except to get out of school. So there wasn't any sense in which I could see a way of learning that I would enjoy. But at the same time, when I was at school, I think one of the experience of having teachers constantly sort of knocking me, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for not good reasons, was that I definitely didn't want to have a boss. I remember towards the end of undergraduate studies, I decided to apply to do postgraduate studies, to do a master's and PhD. Because again, that was a way of not working. And I got a bursary, I got money which paid for my postgraduate studies, and it meant that I didn't have to work. But actually I was working hard all the time, but I just wasn't working in the sort of jobs that my friends were working in. And I think that was a brilliant thing for me, because I would have been extremely stressed out and stressed out had I had, the boss that I'd always tried to avoid since school. So I think the thing about the great thing that university offered for me was the ability to be my own boss. And eventually, as a lecturer, you are kind of your own boss. You research by yourself, you make links with other people, you teach your own modules, you teach your own courses, and you are able to engage with students and work with students to support them as they explore their own ideas. So in one way, ironically, by sticking in education, despite the fact that I hated the experience of school, I was able in my adult life to avoid the thing that I'd hated in my childhood, of having a boss, of being bossed around. And I think that was something that was really important for me. And I think when I think about other people in my family who aren't, who didn't go to university, they don't necessarily have that freedom. They're in jobs where they've got a boss who can sack them on a whim. They've got sometimes they've got lower pay. Sometimes sometimes they feel as if they're being dominated by people in the workplace. And I think that's one thing that university's given me, that I don't feel like that in my daily life. But that's quite a transformation for me to think about education like that, given that I hated school that much, and given that I thought that education was just being told to shut up, to sit in silence, to copy things out of books, to do stuff that was pointless. So I suppose what I would say to my kids is that education isn't that. It can be that in certain contexts, but if you find the right educational environment, it can be a liberating experience. It can give you opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have. I think one of the things that people should remember about school is that things that are said to you by teachers often are said without any consideration by the teacher of the long-lasting impact. Because I remember in a science lesson in year 7 being told by this old, notoriously lechy science teacher to shut up because I didn't have the wit. And I sit here now still remembering that, having written various books, having presented at international conferences, having appeared in documentaries on the BBC, Al Jazeera, these sorts of things. And I suppose that was like a motivating comment. And I don't know what his life's like now, but I know that my life's a lot better than his. And I think that's something which is reassuring. So I think when people say that sort of thing to you, you can use it as a motivating force to propel your life forward.